It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here today. And I thank Ian and the Institute for giving me the chance to share with you some insight about the other side of the globe, and to give you a perspective on some of the work that we are currently conducting in Europe, which I see a tremendous relation to work being done here at QUT, but even beyond. With the upcoming G20 event next year, I see high potentials for you here at QUT to find collaborators on themes and topics you are working on in Europe. And so one of the ideas is to give you insight in what's going on. And this insight is beyond what you can read in the papers. Because of my distinct role in the European Commission right now, I'm helping to shape the program. So don't shy away later on the QA. If you have particular questions on what's going on in Europe, I'm more than happy to try to answer the questions. I don't know if I can answer all of them, depends on what kind of questions you have, but I'm more than happy to do so. Before I open up for Q&A, of course, I would like to give you an introduction into my work, into the work, what's going on in Europe. And as you could see from the invitation, the topic of today is entitled the European Innovation Partnership on Smart Cities and Communities. And particular focus here is on addressing the EU climate goals that the EU has for 2020. You could ask the questions, not anything beyond 2020. The answer is yes, there is other goal set for 2050, but the presentation today is focusing on those for 2020. First look to start with is, and since this is being called the series of grand challenges, is to look into societal challenges that are of relevance from the perspective of the European Union. The European Commission has set a so-called Europe 2020 strategy. And it covers 6 areas that are listed up here. As you can see, it ranges from health, democratic change and well-being, given that we know that Europe overall is a shrinking community in terms of numbers of people living there, over to food security and sustainable agriculture and everything that has to do in that space, up to secure, clean and efficient energy, smart, green and integrated transport, inclusive, innovative and secure societies, and climate actions themselves like resource efficiency and raw materials. So the area that we're going to go into a bit deeper can be defined as this. So the lower 4 areas are of relevance to this European Innovation Partnership I'm going to talk you through. It doesn't mean that the other 3 are unimportant, they are just not being covered by that area that I'm going to address today. So here are the so-called EU climate goals for 2020. The term is called 20-20-20 by 2020. And which 20-20-20 are is listed up here so you can see them. It's the energy efficiency increase that we would like to achieve, which I can tell you already up front, this is the most difficult goal of all 3 to achieve. Even the very highly developed country of Germany, with respect to energy efficiency, will not meet this goal if there are not additional extra efforts to be taken. 20% reduction of greenhouse gas, that's referred to the numbers of 1990, I must say. And with respect to that, Germany, for example, is in a very good position. It has achieved already 18% out of the 20%. So it has to go 2% more to reach that in the next 7 years. But overall in Europe it's quite different. And as these are European goals, and you all hope we have enough understanding about math, then if someone is underachieving, somebody else has to overachieve in order to get to the appropriate middle. And the third is especially important to some of the activities I'm going to look into, and that is 20% renewable energy production. And here one of the biggest topic we have is centralized production versus decentralized production. And I'm going to go and talk about that a bit later in my presentation. So these 2020 by 2020 drives the European Innovation Partnership that I'm going to talk about. So what can research and innovation contribute to these three goals? Should be the question if I'm in a university like QUT. Now, I guess some of you, those of you who are familiar with the EU, know that the EU is spending significant amount of money for R&D activities through a so-called framework program. Some of you are familiar with our internal terms. We are currently in the 7th framework program. They're going to close by the end of this year. And guess what? They're going to be an 8th framework program. And because it's boring to number them, EU has decided we're going to change the name. So this next program is not being called anymore the 8th program. It's going to be called Horizon 2020, which is exactly the end of the 8th period. So within that program, Horizon 2020, which is the so-called Research and Innovation Program, and the numbers are getting confirmed as we speak. It's still not official, but we assume 7.2 billion euros being spent in the next 7 years on this program for research and innovation. Here is the overall charter that they have given themselves. First and most important is these societal challenges that the European Union has identified in the Europe Strategy 2020 will be taken into consideration. I can report that almost 40% of the 70.2 billion will go in addressing especially these needs, which is a substantial change to what the EU has done before. Second is that R&I, the I is brand new in the philosophy of the European Framework Program. It means research should work hand in hand now with those innovation partners, typically enterprises, that would take the idea and bring that to the market. Europe has identified an urgent need to change the program as it was in the last 7 frameworks. Why? Because while we were good in creating the invention, maybe even patent the invention and thus protected the IP, Europe is very poor in materializing that afterwards for the wealth of the community. And just to name one example, which is the most visible and prominent one, Europe, and I can even say Germany, is the world leader in IP ownership of photovoltaic solutions. And today the market is flooded almost by 100% by Chinese products. And the complete entire enterprise community in in Saxony is almost diminished. Most of them are bankrupt, meanwhile, and the few which are left are probably bought by the Chinese. That cannot be in best Europe's interest, and so they decided that these kinds of examples, which have been reported by a group of experts, of researchers and technologists called the High-Level Group for Key Enabling Technologies, as a result of this report, they said, we have to have research working now closer with those going to the market. And you will see that in the program that there will be initiatives that going end to end. And I'm going to report about, especially about the second part, the innovation part, because it's the new part that needs to get understood and introduced today. And the third is reflecting exactly what I'm saying by saying, okay, so we need to have something next to our well-developed and well-established research instruments. You may have heard about our European research areas called ERA, or our European Research Center initiatives, where you can have dedicated research programs established. We have now put up a new instrument since the last 2 to 3 years, which are now really taking off, that are called European Innovation Partnerships. European Innovation Partnerships should take the research and bring it to market, to make a long story short. So now the question for today is, why do we deal with cities? Why is the topic of today smart city and communities? And I think it's good to have a look into the situation globally. And first thing you will uncover is the cities of the world are the powerhouses of the world. So if you think about GDP as a mean to define how powerful an area is, you will see these numbers that I have just listed up here from my friends from McKinsey. So 65% of global GDP is created by the 600 most fast-growing cities in the world. And that is relatively small community compared to the rest of the world. And they own 2/3. By the way, this is nothing different. I mean, I'm not a researcher and would never talk to people that are looking into the history, but going back in history, you will find this is a very typical situation. Countries were never as powerful as cities were if you go back in history. And actually today it's the same, just we don't experience it anymore that much. We see G20, G8, and we should think about C20 or C600 or something like that. And actually there is a C6, where the top 6 cities are together. So, and that breaking down to Europe shows you the 20 largest cities in Europe count for 1/3 of GDP. Or if I go to Germany, my home country, I'm based, 64% of Germany's GDP is in cities larger than 300,000. So that gives you an idea why cities are important, why they are the powerhouse. And if I would go and look into cities that are starting from a range, let's say, of 50,000, which you cover the typical size of an urban infrastructure in Europe, you can practically say that about 80%, nearly 85% of GDP is being created there. Or in other words, the rural areas are less important for GDP. This is probably for you a different view, but for those Europeans that get the discussion around the 1 trillion euro budget, by which 40% of that, roughly 40%, I have to look up the real numbers, but about that, is going into supporting agriculture in Europe. By knowing that's less than 10% of GDP, gives you an understanding of the complication we have right now in Europe to change Europe into the 21st century. And I'm not against agriculture, don't get me wrong. It's just a matter to put that in perspective and to understand. Now here's another story. If cities are so important, are they all of the same? And the answer is no. And we should have at least 2 categories. I didn't want to make it too complicated, so I made 2 categories. We can think of more and be happy to discuss that later. But at least these 2 characteristics should be, these 2 categories characterized by the growth of the cities should be taken into consideration. If I should have asked you at the beginning, before starting with my talk, what do you think about smart city? I'd be sure most of you would have answered me solutions around megacities. Tokyo, Shanghai, Shenzhen, I don't know. Brisbane, of course. Many of these cities have a rapid growth, and they are coping with this rapid growth. Many of those that are dealing with this rapid growth have the luxury or the opportunity to do it also in a kind of green field. That means there is enough land surrounding them that they can create new suburbs from scratch. That's fantastic for companies like Siemens, Alstom, GE, and what the names are, because they can move in, create a new tube or whatsoever. It's perfect. How many new tubes are going to be built in Europe? Maybe 1, 2, maybe 0. How many new suburbs of the size of these megacities are being created in Europe? Probably none. Why? Because that's the other side of the coin. The European cities are growing barely. The 0.3% is due to immigrants and largely dependent on certain parts of Europe. So if I would put up the map of Europe, you would see quite a difference. In Germany, there's only 2 cities that are growing. This is Munich and Hamburg. Maybe Berlin in the future. All others have to cope with a shrinking community over the next 30 to 40 years. Some of them at a situation that they may even quote unquote disappear. So countries that are coping with this problem do normally not have the luxury to create a new city from scratch. There are no new mega city to be built in Europe, for sure. Not in the lifetime of us here in the room. And that means there is not one solution fits all. Or in other words, all these interesting discussions we have around smart cities with respect to mega cities are not appropriate solutions for European cities, for most of the European cities. That brought us together to say, we have to do a change. We have to think about that. And we figured out that the industry is not catching it up yet. Why? Because it's so cumbersome, it's so difficult, it's so tiny, so distributed. And it's not this one thing. You don't go to one place and you get $1 billion contract and go for it. You may get $1 million contract and you need thousands of them. That's really a pity. That's a hard work to do. So it's a completely different model to think about. We can say commoditization of something like smart city solutions, and that's what we have to think about. And that's nothing there. At least we couldn't see anything. So that's the motivation. We could summarize that in 2 things. I don't know whether that works. We can say, in terms of smart cities, of mega cities being smart, it would mean resource efficiency in new infrastructures. In Europe, it's rather resource efficiency in existing infrastructures. A colleague of mine from Technical University of Berlin, she said, it's like an open heart surgery when we talk about smart city solutions in Europe. And that means we have to be very careful, as you know, we don't want to have the patient die. So, because of all of that, and in order to achieve the climate goals that I set at the beginning, the European Commission has called for an initiative, and that's being called Smart Cities and Communities, which you can look up at the internet. There's a stakeholder platform. You're even invited, even if you're not a European citizen, to provide input to that stakeholder platform. You're more than happy if you do so. You can describe your own ideas on how to solve that. You can provide your own solutions that you have at hand. It's a very open platform to be discussed, and it's being used to facilitate our strategic plan, how we're gonna do that in the future. Now, three areas have been identified as most critical, most interesting, and politically, simply said, these 3 Director Generals came together. And these are namely transport and mobility, energy, and information and communication technology. And so maybe it's no surprise that we're going to find 3 strategic themes to work on. So one is sustainable urban mobility. The other one is energy efficient districts, which you can translate currently in the current discussion most probably into near zero energy districts, and so-called integrated infrastructures, which means combining the different infrastructures that exist within the city and create more value through out of the integration than having these infrastructures being used and developed independently. So these three areas are the first areas that are gonna be addressed, and where this European Innovation Partnership will be established and solutions will be developed for. How does it happen? The idea is to show the innovation, okay? So the research should not get stuck in the labs. It should be out there where the citizens are. The citizens should have first-hand experiences with this new technology, and that's why we call it lighthouse projects. We're going to establish huge labs, so to say. I mean, huge compared to a lab that you probably have here, some of those that I have been able to visit. To give you an idea, and in average we're talking about a city or city quarter worth 50 to 70,000 citizens living in that area, or equivalent people working in that area. That's about what we're looking for. That means for you folks, if you participate, we as researchers, we can't hide away. We can't lock the door and saying it didn't work, doesn't matter. If it didn't work, wow, okay, 70,000 people will have it after us. So we have to be assured that what we're doing is something that is workable. So that means we have to think about how we're going to do this. And one of the ways to look at that is we have to have competitiveness. We need to find a way that we have different options to go, and that we can look what is the best way to succeed. Okay? And that leads to the fact that it's not one driver in a city. Many people that I talk to, when I discuss with them smart city or city, they only think about the city administration. Brisbane Council would be the representative over here. Brisbane Council counts only for a small fraction of the city. There are many others in this city that have a say for other parts of the city, like your utilities companies that are based here, just to name one, or the enterprises that are working here. And the clear message is, if we want to get smart in a city, they need to come together. They need to come together and have to speak. Because today they don't, or partially, mostly don't speak together. So the challenge is to put up what the term we are using is a multi-stakeholder consortium. And within this multi-stakeholder consortium, we have to find the representatives of these key partners. That includes, by the way, also stakeholders representing the citizens themselves within the city. It's a clear message that a lighthouse project will only be a lighthouse project if it's both top-down and bottom-up. Top-down in the sense that the top leaders understand what to do together, and bottom-up means having the citizens actively engaged in the process. And it's about implementing new innovative technologies derived from new ideas from research. And these technologies should lead us in overachieving the EU climate goals. Coming back to this average problem. Yeah? So if we have lighthouses that overachieve, we can have some others that underachieve and will still be okay. So these cities will not be measured by 2020, they will be measured by higher numbers. Which numbers is not yet clear. If I cite our German Commissioner Guenther Oettinger, who is the lead on the Commission side for this initiative, he thinks about 40%. 40 by 2020. Whether that's achievable, we'll see. But definitely overachieve. And last but not least, it must be replicable. It is not a one-off solution. We're not looking for tailor-made solution for one city that no one else in the world could use anymore. We want to have solutions that can be easily replicated, affordable for cities in Europe, and then hopefully affordable for cities all over the world. So if the replication leads to something which is not affordable, which can only be done by subsidizing it or by, I don't know what other kinds of method, then it's not attractive. It must lead to an affordable, replicable solution. So now I wanted to, that's the setting, okay, that's where we want to go. Now I thought that I share a bit with you what I'm going to do with my partners, what our thoughts are. As Ian said, I'm the CTO of the Urban Software Institute, and by no surprise that institute deals with urban solutions, particularly in the software side. So we have some ideas on how to solve some of these challenges, and I would like to share that with you. Also an invitation to you, if you feel that you can contribute to that, I thought it's good that you know what I'm doing, because then you may know whether it's worthwhile to connect or not. So let me give you some insight into this. And let me start in giving you a setting. Where does the Urban Software Institute belong to, or where we are? So we're in the southwest of Germany, and that's a bit of a map for those familiar with Germany. So we are based actually right here and here. Waldorf may be known to some of you. It's a tiny little town of 14,000 people, but it has two world leaders, home SAP Software AG, a famous software company, and Heidelberger Druck, the world's largest printing press machine manufacturer. And the idea of the software cluster is, first of all, by all measurements of independence, this is being considered Europe's #1 software cluster. Of those that are in this region here, these are some 11,000 software enterprises. Most of them are very small, obviously, but still a very impressive number. And we employ almost 800,000 people there. So our goal there is to develop theory and tools as a cluster together for the digital transformation of enterprises and organizations. So that's the goal that we have set ourselves for the cluster. And as you can see from that goal, it fits perfectly for the idea of smart cities, because that's the digitalization of the city. And that's by no surprise that some of us in that consortium, and I listed here a few, the others will get mad at me that I didn't list all of them, but 200 partners to list, and you can't see anything on the foil. Some of us will take these ideas that we are developing here in a large research and innovation initiative and bring it to the city. And I'm one of those leading this initiative towards the city. Others focusing on enterprises or other organizations. So within this software cluster, our vision is, how do we help the city? And I give you two examples now to give you an insight on how we see the world. First example is this. So we should go for near zero energy neutral districts. That means we have to have an energy balance of near zero. And that means in practical terms, whatever we need, whatever we consume on energy in that quarter, we need to produce in that quarter. And that means we're talking about decentralized energy production, which I said at the beginning when we talk about renewables. So by no surprise, you see our vision is here largely dependent on PV systems, but not only. We also have different other opportunities taking into consideration, which are listed over here. Most important is to understand this tells us we integrate the different networks that exist. Gas, heat, or you would say cooling, probably over here in Germany, cooling is less of an issue than heating. The classical electricity network with the ICT network, and the combination should allow us to really create this near zero energy district. What does it mean in practice? It means if the sun shines, and we have enough PV energy being created, it may not be consumed at that time, right? So we shouldn't get lost. We need to turn it into something. And here are examples. So you can turn it into the heating or cooling network, one way to store that energy. You can go and, in Germany it's quite popular to have public pools. I don't know how popular it is over here. You have one at least here, kind of public. The problem in Germany is they're all deficit. They never run profitable. So finding a way to at least compensate for some of the cost is quite attractive. So there are ideas like heating the pool with PV energy once that's available, and you may adapt then the pool to the conditions there. Same could be for large cooling systems. Think about large distribution centers for grocery products where you have to have a big cooling system in place. We also, of course, have research going on in storing electricity, but as of today, in most cases, this is not commercially viable. It's an interesting technology research. We're going to continue in this. It is important. We're going to change the world, but it doesn't change it tomorrow. And we have to understand that. So such a system cannot only rely on this. And EMS stands for Energy Management Systems. So that's the intelligence. That's the ICT, the software part that comes into play to manage all of that in a careful way. But also materials. As an example here for many questions around materials is and I'm still surprised to see your fences over here, your glasses, your glasses in your windows. Fenster is the German word, I apologize. Your windows. If you go to Germany, you see completely different way on how to deal with windows than you do over here. We are so, I don't know, completely on the other side on believing that a window should not lose anything on energy, that we are absolutely crazy in this. So one way to deal with nice old buildings, landmark buildings, is you cannot insulate them from the outside because you would destroy this nice facade that they have. But you could do something in fixing the window problem. So a lot of research is going into how to put nice windows that look like ancient windows while they are at the best possible energy saving standard you can think of. And that's no surprise if you see a German presenting such a picture that he takes windows into consideration. But what it tells you in more general terms is we're seeking for retrofit solutions for old buildings. Buildings that cannot be destroyed and shouldn't be destroyed. They should be maintained. But that doesn't mean that they should sit on ancient energy structure. Make them modernized, thus that the people who wanted to look for well-being feel well in these new buildings. That's, by the way, one of the area of expertise that my institute brings into this. So this is a vision that we would like to make real. And to give you an idea, we want to make that real on the size of a lighthouse project. So how can a city quarter, a city district of 70,000 people completely being managed on their own? Of course, it has implication on the political side as well. It's not only research. If we do that, what's the implication to the transmission network, to the overland transmission network? Those of you familiar with Europe or Germany may know that there's a big debate currently going on of having these huge windmills in the North Sea and then having big cables to Bavaria. And that is from the north to the south, the maximum length of Germany you can think of. And is that really the way to go? Is something that we, the group here, including myself, we're questioning right now. It's highly political, but we believe that if you look back in the 19th century when the first electricity power plants were created, where had they been created? Next door to the industry which used the electricity. And now we're thinking about having that more than 1,000 kilometers away, I think it's nonsense. I think we should think about these kind of structures. I'd be happy to discuss that later. I know that there are others that have another view on this, but this team here is strongly believing we should go back to where it comes from, local production and local management. Some call this whole thing here a virtual power plant as a synonym to what we are used to today. So this is an example. I don't want to deep dive into it this afternoon, but to show you we have a software architecture behind that. We have an understanding on how to address that. And you see, for those of you who are in the ICT business, it has some of the key components that you all are thinking today, also here in QUT associated. It's the big data topic. It can be complemented by the term open data, which is equally important because the data we're talking about, part of the data we're talking about, should be open to all businesses, and that's another very difficult topic to discuss. It's about the Internet of Things or the sensors coming in. Related to that is the notion of analytics or complex event processing. When should I do what? And finally, it's all about services. We're running here the Smart Service CRC, and so QUT is best familiar with the issue that if you want to have these services being provided, you have to have the right software infrastructure in place. At the end, we're talking about resilient, local, network-based on typically intelligent so-called substations and smart meters. That's the technical terms we're dealing with in order to make that happen. Here's another example, second example. So that was about energy, one of the pillars. The other one is sustainable urban mobility. And there's a lot of things that I could talk about. I picked this one here. And it's something that we all discover daily. I guess there's no difference in Brisbane. And that is, there's traffic jam in the city and there's no help. Your GPS system is not of help at any way to get you a better way. I know that we have the Smart Transport Research Center. I think that was right? That is dealing with this topic right here, and I was fascinated to see what you have done here. Actually, I hope that I can take some of that back to Germany, and we'll demonstrate that to some of the cities there. We have done something similar, like what you have done, and that is we have said we wanted to collect information that's available and make the use of it and provide that back to the citizens. So what we do with the city of Darmstadt is we have all the traffic lights information in our system. We get it on a very regular basis and can therefore quite easily analyze how busy the city is. And our vision is that we're going to provide personalized route information in such a way that it not only suits you getting to the best way from A to B, but at the same time taking the stress out of the city system so that overall the flow is the best possible way that we can get. And if the flow is best possible, we probably will produce the lowest CO2 emission in the city that we can envision. So that's an activity we're currently undertaking. It is not only a big data problem, this is a typical open data problem, because you have to make this data available in such a way that everybody can use it. And of course, city authorities in Germany are not different to city authorities probably in Australia. They are worried. They don't know what they're doing here. They wanted to understand what they are doing, and they need researchers. And here the Technical University of Darmstadt is extremely important to convince them that this is the right way to go. And convincing is more than just sitting together and talk. It's a long process of building trust and relationship to make this happen. So that's an important element to it. And Max Heuser, he was here till yesterday, is also an AdPro at QUT. He's one of our partners here, and we are grateful about this relationship because we could demonstrate here that this is possible to do in such an environment without harming the administration nor the system. What we have added to that, or we're going to add to that, we have done that with some students at the Technical University, is that we said, okay, there are some streets that don't have lights, right? If there's no, traffic lights. If they don't have traffic lights, how do I figure out what's going on in that street? Should I send people that way? Or is it also already busy? So what we have done, we used the notion of participatory sensing, which means we asked students to download that app called the Noise Map, which does nothing than open up the mic for about 20-30 seconds and sends back that sample to our server. But we were able, through clever analysis, to figure out what kind of noise is it. Is it street noise? Is it the noise of cars? At what speed that's probably going to be? And therefore could detect even the traffic in these side streets. It's not perfect. Many of these samples are useless. But it's in the idea of the wisdom of the crowd, hopefully sufficiently enough to improve our information for those parts of the city that do not have street lights, traffic lights. And to complement that even further, we were able to convince the public transport system to help us and providing us information. So you see this car here. 7 of these cars are going through Darmstadt with a sensor on it, and this sensor gives us additional information. And you can think about, as we discussed it here in the last couple of days, also of cars, like the cab drivers, for example, that could take this kind of information and bring that back. So those who are anyway go through the city, in our case it's the cars of the public transport, provide us additional information. That's an idea where the stakeholder approach is coming into play. You as a citizen are participating. You as a public transport organization are participating. You as a city provide the traffic light infrastructure. That's how multi-stakeholder is going to become real. So these are 2 examples that I hope show to you that it's possible. This picture should only tell you we don't believe in isolated solutions. So this picture hopefully reminds you of the picture 2 slides before. It's the same picture and should be the same. It has different applications on top of it, and that's our philosophy. A smart city is smart if it has one integrated infrastructure and not isolated solutions next to each other. That was the 3rd topic of the European Innovation Partnership I referred at the beginning. So to summarize that a bit, we have 3 domains. I would like to stress one that I hope in one of my next presentations we can stress further. As an AdPro here, I'm helping the Information Systems School in developing a great idea, which I believe is a great idea. I hope the others here at QUT feel the same, which is called Connected Communities, which is bringing this ICT into the community. And I think this is a fabulous idea. There are multiple different communities you can think of. We at the Urban Software Institute and the Technical University of Darmstadt will complement the effort here by taking this idea of connected communities into the smart city idea and make that an integral part. And that's where the citizen engagement gonna happen then in the future. We strongly believe on a common platform. For us, our platform is called Urban Pulse. That's the integrated infrastructure it has to be. And of course, then there are multiple solutions here. So you can talk lengthy. You see another example I haven't talked about here. We are engaged in electromobility. That's another means to sustainable urban mobility. So there have been many, many solutions to come here and many, many solutions to come here. And this has to be many, many apps to be complemented. Our view on this is that the city will not be able to run it on its own. We will not go to Brisbane Council or equivalent saying, now you have a new charter and you have a new system to run. That's not possible. We don't believe in this. We believe in a so-called cloud-based software as a service idea, by this being provisioned through internet service providers who have the right knowledge how to do that, and everybody can benefit from that. So for those folks of you who are familiar with the terms, we're going to believe in a platform as a service strategy on which solutions as a service will be put on top of it. And which ones is set by the agenda that is being defined by the Smart Cities and Communities European Innovation Partnership. We have taken this approach from this cluster, from that region, from my institute, from the Technical University of Darmstadt, now into a larger scope of Germany. I'm running, as Ian said in the introduction, the German Innovation Roundtable. The German Innovation Roundtable is a think tank and network of research-intense enterprises in Germany. And we have created this think tank to be cross-sectoral, because we learned that always thinking in your own sector only is not sufficient, especially for these kinds of problems. So we decided as a think tank, we're focusing on these societal challenges that you saw in the EU 2020 strategy at the beginning of my talk. And within this community of enterprises, we decided we support this initiative through a Smart City Forum, as you said in your introduction. This is a think tank today of 15 European cities, still growing, and we discuss their needs and the barriers that hinders them to get their needs fulfilled in the context of the European Innovation Partnership, which means in the context of the EU climate goals. This is an idea whom we are talking about. So it's centered around Germany, but it's not only Germany. We have some partners in the neighborhood. It's going to expand over time. We started, of course, as the German Innovation Roundtable with a focus on our country. This is very closely aligned with the European initiative. Commissioner Oettinger and us are regularly talking to each other to exchange. I'm the representative in the expert group on the Commission side to make sure that we at the Commission side do not only talk theoretically, but that we have input from the cities on what their real demand is in order to ensure that the research and innovation agenda we're looking after at the end will meet the needs. To remember, we're going with our lab into 70,000 households or whatsoever. We can't fail. So we better talk to the cities to understand what is useful and what's not. Some of these cities are larger cities you might have heard about. Some of them are the typical mid-sized city you probably haven't heard about, but these are the ones that have the highest replication factor because they exist in thousands of cities in Europe. And so it's important that we do not only go to the big cities. By the way, you may see that we are also looking for a certain distribution. That means we have cities that have a history of slow development and certain growth, and we have others where we have to uncover and respect a decrease in population over time. So this is also part of these 15 cities. Let me come to my summary and would like to conclude as follows. The idea of the Urban Software Institute is we need to incubate now these fantastic research ideas so that they can be made available. So the fundament on which we are building is an incubator of new ideas and technologies for urban environment. The first thing is we do that in the context of the European Innovation Partnership, as I have laid out, for smart cities and communities in these three areas, fulfilling these three climate goals. We have the software cluster as a group of organizations, enterprises, research organizations that are working together on an R&I agenda to make it happen from our perspective. And we have identified the smart city solutions as central. I can say we also believe strongly that the ICT / the software part of the smart city is a fundamental element and needs to be reflected like that. That's probably no surprise when you're dealing with software that you believe in this, but it can be shown and proven. We extended that to all of Germany through the German Innovation Roundtable and this network to the cities to make sure we understand the real needs and barriers that these cities have checking then with the research organizations and the innovation groups that they have something in the pocket, and if not, where do we find it? And last but not least, it should all lead to new lighthouse projects, ideally in these 15 cities, but could be elsewhere in the world, that show and demonstrate that we can deliver on our promises. Thank you very much for your attention.